Welcome everyone to Include NYC Online, the IEP and Remote Learning Plan, What's the Difference? My name is Rich Overton and I'll be your Include NYC Ops support for today. And Denise Khatri will be leading today's discussion. A little bit about Include NYC. For more than 3 decades, we have been helping young people with disabilities, their families, and professionals. We help New York City families make informed decisions about special education, navigate disability systems, and advocate for themselves. We were founded by 3 moms who had children with disabilities and wanted to share information with other families. We offer workshop, a helpline, and resources, which we are adapting to respond to coronavirus-related school closures. You can find online workshops, parent support groups, and live streams on the Include NYC website calendar. If you have individual questions and want to speak to an educator, please use our helpline at 212-677-4660, and our Spanish helpline is 212-677-4668. You could also fill out a help request form on our website at www.includenyc.org. We also have new timely special education resources on our website related to remote learning, fun activities at home, self-care, and more. Please subscribe to our emails on our website homepage or follow us on social media at Include NYC. A few housekeeping tips for today. Whether you're an Include NYC veteran or joining us for the first time, we're really glad that you're here and we hope you'll participate. When you enter this room, your sound and video will be off. You can share your thoughts or technical issues in the chat box, but for questions for our presenter, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. The educator and myself will do our best to respond. Please note, for specific workshop topics like today's, the topic is very important right now, and we understand that. We have more attendees than expected. Our guest presenter will do her best to answer as many questions as possible, but unfortunately, we will not be able to answer every one. To receive individual support following this webinar, again, please feel free to fill out a help request form online at includenyc.org or call a helpline at 212-677-4660. We appreciate everyone's patience and understanding, and we thank you for joining us. Now, I would love to welcome Denise Khatri, Special Education Trainer, Queens Regional Partnership Center, New York City Department of Education. Denise, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Hello, everyone. It's really been my pleasure to partner with Include over the past several years. I feel like I'm a part of the family in some ways, and I hope they feel the same way about me. And I'm really here this evening, hopefully to share some valuable information with you about the difference between the IEP and the remote learning plan, although they are connected. The quarantine has really given us this opportunity to think about how we support our students and our children. Since school closure, parents and professionals are all working to answer so many questions. In the moment, things are constantly shifting. I mean, day to day, the news says all kinds of things, so the shift is real in terms of how information is changing. And I want you to know I'm with you in this. I'm a parent, and I'm still very concerned about my own daughter's transition to remote learning. You know, in all honesty, and anybody who knows me knows this, I really love my daughter, but her education from home in the midst of a pandemic, was not part of the grand plan. Her school, along with the other schools, made the decision to transition current students to online instruction. And as an educator, I have to tell you in my own story, as a person with visual impairment, what I find is it's challenging for me to adapt to various platforms to communicate with my own colleagues. And I'm definitely used to face-to-face communication. So this type of communication is new for me. Despite the challenges, my team and I are working hard to share resources that we've developed so we can support parents and children and schools. At-home learning can be really intimidating and really demanding for any parent. For most of us, school closures as a result of coronavirus have us grappling with new realities. And families and schools are jumping over some major hurdles over facilitating online learning. But I believe we are all growing in the face of some of these changes. First, a little background before we turn our attention to students with disabilities. In March, the Department of Education announced that schools were providing virtual online learning with a shared goal to ensure continuity of learning and student engagement. And that's definitely a goal for us. The department also shared that special education services would be provided differently to accommodate our students. And with the stay-at-home quarantine in place, schools are offering virtual learning using tools such as video conferencing and phone consultations. So learning is not exactly as it was the same just 3 months ago. So things happen very quickly. In April, students in grades 6 through 12 and parents of pre-K through 12 students were invited to participate in an anonymous survey that was online. And we just want you to know the results of this survey were really intended to help schools check in with the family, student needs, and plan for remote learning over the upcoming weeks. The feedback also helps the department expand their knowledge of current learning situations and to really make improvements for the remainder of the year. And some of the concerns that are really pertinent to, I think, some of what we're going to be talking about today are the child's well-being. So the parent survey focused on concerns for the child, namely the child's well-being, participation in learning activities, and reliable access to technology, which can be an issue, internet access, and then the availability of staff and communication. So the student survey gauged the child's feelings about what's happening, the ability to complete assignments, the ease of difficulty with learning tools, and support from adults. And I know we're talking about remote learning plans, but I know that these are related issues that we've been grappling with over this time. Just so you know, and this stands, students with disabilities are still entitled to special education services. By now, your child has probably made the transition to online learning, and the Department of Education is committed to continuity of learning for our students. Today, we're focusing on IEPs, or students with IEPs. So let's start here. What I want to do is answer some common questions about the IEP, the remote learning plan, and point out some differences between the IEP and the remote learning plan. You'll also find some additional resources that may be helpful to your families. And I have other resources. There are two main ones, but there are other pieces that I can lend a hand afterwards in terms of sending to you. And a number of questions have really come up as a result of school closure. So I'd really like to take some time to discuss and answer some of these questions, although there will be a Q&A at the end. So this really comes from the tip sheet that was created. So let's talk about the IEP. What is an IEP? And some of you may know what an IEP is already, but I want to mention it because it actually lends itself to the remote learning plan in a big way. An IEP is an individualized education program for a student with a disability ages 3 to 21. And it's a map that really lays out the child's special education program. The purpose of the IEP is to really set reasonable learning goals for a child and to state the services that the school district will provide for the child. Each IEP is designed to meet students' unique needs. And what we're going to do is talk about the remote learning plan in a moment, But before that, I want to point out, in terms of length, the IEP, as you know, is in sections, but it's longer in length than the remote learning plan. Another question that frequently comes up is, what happens to the IEP? Is it valid during school closure? And the IEP is definitely valid. It's still valid, but remote learning plans are the document that we're using to identify the instruction and services that will be provided during school closure when children go back to their school sites. So what we're really talking about is that the remote learning plan is a separate document, but it's based on the IEP, and that's really important. And it's responsive to the unique circumstances of remote learning. It's different from the IEP, but it's very connected, and we're gonna discuss that in a moment. Another question that comes up is, do IEPs need to be changed when remote learning plans are created? And no, an IEP is created specifically for use in a school setting. So it's not meant for a temporary situation. The remote learning plan is a temporary plan that's used when schools are closed. So we're using remote learning plans, but a lot of the information from the remote learning plan comes from the IEP. So the IEP is still valid, but the remote learning plan is what we're using in this temporary situation to meet the needs of students and to provide an instructional plan for students. Another question you might ask is, what is a remote learning plan? It would be good to talk about that. So a remote learning plan is really an alternative plan for providing students with disabilities IEP services and this continuity of learning while schools are closed. The remote learning plan should include how students will receive related services like counseling, occupational therapy, speech therapy, just to name a few, which can be provided remotely. And information from the IEP is used to write the remote learning plan. So that information from the IEP is really important to the remote learning plan. For example, a student's remote learning plan might state that a student will receive speech therapy from the school speech and language pathologist on Monday and Wednesday from 10:30 a.m. To 11 a.m. And in the remote learning plan, you have frequency, there's duration of the services. So there's some relationship between there's a big relationship between the IEP and the remote learning plan. And the remote learning plan includes things like listening, behavior, speaking, reading, writing, looking at skills to think about as providers plan for instruction for the remote learning plan. And if you're not already, I hope you're familiar with your child's remote learning plan, and I've included it in the handouts if just for your information. It's a remote learning form that I included in the handouts for you. And I just want to say, as a parent, and I'm really a parent first. I'm an educator, but I'm a parent first. So parents are a part of this process. They're a big part of the process. And the goal of the remote learning plan is to make this transfer of services from the student's traditional IEP to what makes sense in a remote environment. Teachers have contacted parents to inform them of the new plans, and parent consent is needed to provide any therapy services that are in terms of getting information by phone. So parent consent is needed to provide services. Another question for you guys that have preschoolers is, what about preschoolers? Well, preschoolers, as with school-age children, should receive the continuity of learning and special education services provided by schools to the greatest extent possible. So we're talking about special education related services that have been identified in preschool IEPs. And ongoing communication, this is really important, must be maintained between the family, the preschool program, itinerant service providers to collaborate on activities and instruction for preschoolers. Another question that you might ask is, why is the remote learning plan necessary? Well, really the remote plan is necessary because school districts in New York State decided to provide remote instruction while school buildings are closed. And the law says that all students with disabilities from ages 3 to 21 must have equal access to the same educational opportunities provided to all students during school closures. So this means that special education and related services must continue to be provided. You might ask, who creates the remote learning plan? And in terms of creating the remote learning plan, a special education teacher or other school-based staff that are currently working with the student create the remote learning plan because they're familiar with the student needs. The teachers and providers refer to the IEP and consult therapists and other staff to identify appropriate teletherapy-related services that can be provided. And I have to say that the starting point should always be, in terms of information for the remote learning plan, comes from IEP recommendations. And the remote learning plan shouldn't be made, created, or revised without the parents' input. Schools, in terms of people whose first language is not English, schools can use interpreters to discuss remote learning plans with parents whose preferred language is not English. And recommendations for assistive technology should be considered. So if any assistive tech is needed at a student's home, the school should contact, and we'll put this in the information, specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov. Yet another question that comes up, and there are many, is where can I find my child's remote learning plan? And the completed remote learning plan should be provided to you electronically, or it can be mailed to you if the school doesn't have an email address or you don't have an email address that you've shared with the school. Providers are expected to stay in touch with you and keep track of your child's progress. And this ongoing communication is going to be a key theme here too, because we need that among teachers, therapists, and the family, and that's really important. And while, you know, we're talking about remote learning plans that relate to remote learning instruction, it's important to acknowledge that some students really remote learning doesn't work for every student, is what I want to say. So we need to have honest conversations. Families, providers need to have honest conversation about what is and isn't working. And if you have questions or believe that your child's remote learning plan needs to be adjusted or modified, you should work your way up the ladder in terms of talking to teachers, therapists, or the principal. If you need help contacting anyone, again, it's the email is specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov. Another matter of concern may be, can my child's special education remote learning plan be changed? Yes, the plan is guided by your feedback and your child's response to remote learning, and it can be changed. Your child's progress can be reported to you and will help you understand their response, the child's response to strategies and therapies provided through remote learning. So your information and your input is key. And progress reports are another piece that come up, like, should you expect progress reports? And where do they come from? So that's two questions, like progress reports. Should I be receiving them? And where does the data come from? So you should, yes, you should expect progress reports, and information on the child's progress comes from the response to instruction and really looking at the needs and whether those needs are met by the instructional strategies provided by teachers and providers. At the same time, we want to build on student strengths in support of student goals and information that helps us plan for further instruction. So when we look at remote learning plans, progress should be a piece that's reported on to you by the providers. You might be wondering where the data comes from. And the data comes from really using data collection tools like checklists, rubrics, which are like scoring guides, and conference notes to keep track of how your child is doing. The data should really allow the teacher to adjust instruction based on your input and on how the child is doing. And the remote learning plan can be adjusted to meet the needs of the student. And you really should contact your child's teachers and providers if you feel the plan needs adjusting. Providers should stay in touch with you in the upcoming weeks to track your child's progress. Additionally, can a remote learning plan be written at an IEP meeting? The IEP team may create a contingency or remote learning plan followed by an IEP meeting, but an IEP meeting isn't required to create one. The IEP and the remote learning plan are two separate documents, although they're related, as I said. And just so you know, the IEP process continues to be in the background. Annual review meetings should be happening, continuing to be aimed at planning your child's education and really discussing new information about the child's new academic goals for the year and additional supports and services needed to meet goals. But these meetings will need to happen virtually instead of in person. And it's also helpful to track the type and frequency of the child's special education services that the school is offering for your own documentation. This really increases our capacity to become partners in the teaching and learning process. And I want you to know that you should make sure you have a remote education plan in place. And if you don't, you again speak to the principal, the teachers, the therapist working with the child. And the last question really here is, can parents refuse special education services? Parents have the right to refuse special education services for their child to participate or not participate, delivered through teletherapy. Although waiving remote learning does not affect the IEP, I just want to say it's a good idea to work with teachers and providers first so that adjustments can be made. And in terms of some best practices, I just wanted to give you one or two because I think I'm talking too much and I apologize. Communication is really key. You want to make sure that you're communicating with your child's teachers, and it doesn't look, and all of this looks different for every family. So we want to make sure that we're providing what families need to stay on target of their child's education. And we need to talk about what techniques have been working remotely and what hasn't. So timing of these sessions also needs to be talked about in the house. And I think one of the biggest pieces of this is stay in the loop. Monitor your email, your phone messages, and mail, and be responsive. I know for me, when I miss an email, what happens is I probably could have prevented some things that occur afterwards because I missed the email and didn't attend to it. So stay in the loop. And some families are having a better relationship with teachers and professionals now that they're getting to know each other. But if that hasn't happened, reach out to initiate contact. Documenting, again, is really important, and fostering independence when you can. Like, there are times when the child can't talk to the teacher about needs and concerns, but if this isn't the case, if this is not something that can happen and your child is struggling, please talk to your child's teacher to adjust the plan. Don't be afraid to contact your child's teachers. And just some final thoughts. I just want to say that we know that you as parents, families, and caregivers are stretched out with many issues, including work and caring for your family. So take learning one day at a time, relying on phone consultations, video consultations with teachers. And we know that remote learning is not the same for your children as having a real live person in front of you. Believe me, I know that. But give yourself grace. And the biggest message is that you're not alone and we're all in this together. And remember, staying involved in your child's education really protects their rights. So you can contact Include's helpline at 212-677-4660. We are here for you for support. Thank you. Okay, and I'm ready to take questions. If people have questions about the, I'm happy to answer questions, is what I want to say. I'm sorry.
Denise, we have about, I think we have a few questions in the Q&A box.
Okay,
So,
okay. Thank you, I'm sorry.
no, no problem at all.
Okay,
Let me know if you need any support with those.
okay. The first question here is, do you have information regarding the expectation and or requirement of private schools to provide remote learning plans? The private school is affiliated with the DOE, but is considered a 4410 private school. Today, I think what I'll have to do is get back to you on that question, but I can make sure I do. Because for the most part, I was talking about public schools today, but I definitely can get back to you to answer that question. The next question, I was told by the school that we should amend IEP goals for my child because of COVID-19. And since he wouldn't be able to reach the goals of school being closed, that we would change the goals in the IEP so he can actually reach them. Is that what's supposed to happen? I mean, really, it's a conversation between you and the educators, but in terms of making amendments, the IEP doesn't have to be completely amended. There's some flexibility in the way that the remote learning plans are written, but the IEP goals don't have to be completely amended to address the remote learning plan. And we can talk further on that if you need to. How often should the IEP be updated? And I'm glad you asked this question. The IEP should be updated annually, but if adjustments need to be made, then the parent should really put something in writing that says that they would like to speak to the teacher about the IEP and the goals and all the other pieces that are pertinent to the IEP. But usually there's an annual review that happens, well, there is an annual review that happens every year to talk about the new goals and information that should be included in the IEP. Okay, and I have a question here that says, I'm sorry. I just saw the question, but it went away. Basically, I saw a question that says that parents are teaching children at home, so how can progress reports be written? And I think that's a further conversation because teachers should be working with students remotely, and progress is something that progress reports should happen when teachers are working with students. So I think that I need more information about that to really answer that question.
Denise, I'm here if you need any support from the questions in the Q&A box as well.
I'm just trying to see other questions that are coming up. Are there other questions?
Yep, if you click, are you in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen? And there's a few more open questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, I'm clicking on the box, but I'm not seeing the questions, so I'm sorry.
I can, no problem. Would you like me to read a few of them just to see if?
Yes, would you mind, Rich, please?
No problem at all. So we have, is mediation an option during this time?
I think that the conversation can happen, but mediation probably is going to happen when the new year starts and when we go back to the regular school sites.
Okay, and then we have, let's see. I, as the parent, was supposed to have a say in my son's, am I, as a parent, supposed to have a say in my son's remote learning plan? I did not have a say. It was sent to me after I asked for it.
Okay, then what I would do is speak to the child's providers or the teachers, and have a conversation about the information that's contained in the plan.
Okay. And then I have one question that says, if the school will not provide an RLP until June 1st, what recourse do I have?
I think that's something that we'd have to discuss with Include, because that your child should have a remote learning plan if the child had an IEP in place already. And Jean also came into the Q&A, and I'm sorry, mediation is available, and you can call Include, and she left the number there, and the number is 677-4660-212 if you have questions about mediation. So my apologies on that one.
And we also have, what types of assistive technology are schools making available for students?
I think that really relies on the individual needs of the student. So you'd have to contact the email, the special education at schools.nyc.gov to find out, because the assistive technology really depends on the needs of the child. So that's like an individual piece in terms of what the child really needs for assistive tech.
Okay, great. And we do have a few more. Let's see. Is there a meeting to develop the remote IEP, the remote learning plan, like how there is an IEP meeting?
Normally what happens is, I think because this was such the pandemic happened so quickly, the meeting is not required to have the remote learning plan. But again, if you need to have a conversation about the remote learning plan, you really should contact the child's teacher. So a meeting doesn't have to happen. It's not like a regular IEP meeting. However, the conversation should happen between you and the teachers to make sure that the remote learning plan works for both parties.
Okay. And then the next question is, let's see, can teachers exclude certain goals because they feel like they are not achievable outside of the classroom? What if I disagree as a parent?
Again, that's a conversation. And we could have a conversation about if you're comfortable with this, the parent that's asking this, about what types of goals there are and how it can be worked out. Because I know sometimes with behavioral goals, it's difficult, but they can be worked out. And that's just an example. With behavioral goals, teachers were asking questions about how to help kids reach those goals when they're not meeting with them face to face. So we can have a conversation about that, because there are certain goals that it's not that they can't achieve, but they may be more difficult to achieve remotely. So I think it relies on getting the teacher getting more information on how to help that student.
Great. And then what if a child has significantly increased challenging behaviors at home when they didn't at school, causing them to refuse all instruction and teletherapy services? Can a family request FBA, ABA services for home in a remote learning plan?
That I'd have to look into, and again, we can talk about that. I'd have to look into that. But I know that that is an issue, with the behavioral piece and how students, they're at home and it's a different environment. So I'd have to provide more information on that. So let me do a little research and get back to you on that question.
Great. And then in terms of annual IEP meetings, how does COVID-19 affect those deadlines in terms of when annual reviews are held?
Annual reviews should still be held even in the face of the COVID pandemic. I think there might be slight delays in the meetings. However, the meetings should still be held. The guidance is that annual reviews should still happen with in this pandemic. And the IEP process still happens regardless of the fact that we're in COVID-19 right now and we're staying at home.
Is the remote learning plan applicable to non-public schools?
I believe so. The remote learning plan is applicable to public schools and to non-public schools, I'm sorry. And I think the CSCs, the Committee on Special Education, is working to make the transfer from the IEP to the remote learning plan.
How can I get teachers to make adjustments to their assignment styles they create for my son?
Again, that involves conversation, and I have supports and things like that I've been providing to help students and teachers in all of this. So maybe I can send some more resources that would help in that regard. But I think, again, it's the conversation about what the needs of the student are and how it's working or not working for that child and for the parent.
Goals should not be changed due to remote learning, should they?
Yes, the thing is that goals really, what happens is you're making a transfer from the goal to the remote learning plan. So it shouldn't be a totally new, the look of the remote learning plan is a little different, but the goal should remain pretty intact. Some things are difficult to do remotely, but I don't think like every goal should change on an IEP because we're now talking about remote learning plans.
Let's see, and then we have, I think, time for one or two more questions. What about new referrals for special education evaluations through Cpsc, for example, or special education services for children who have been waiting with IEPs before COVID began? Any recourse or services to help?
If most of the remote learning plans are happening because there was an IEP in place, so the evaluation process should happen. The only issue is that there are certain evaluations that have to be done face to face. So it could definitely like delay the remote learning plan a little bit, delay the remote learning plan. So the remote learning plans are created for students that already have the IEP in place.
Okay, and then let's see, what would you suggest if we have already talked to teachers and providers, if we have attempted to collaborate but nothing changes?
I think that might be a situation where you might want to contact Include for some needed advice that goes beyond what you've already done.
Yep. And I just want to remind everyone, if they do need additional support after this, I know Denise mentioned it, but our helpline is 212-677-4660 in English and 212-677-4668 in Spanish. Denise, do you have time for one or two more questions? How are you looking?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. One attendee asked why some students are receiving instruction on video with their teachers and classmates and other students are not. There are students just having assignments in Google Classroom, but not properly instruction with the teacher.
I think I'm sure that it was the schools, some of the instruction is looking differently depending on how the school chose to handle instruction. So it was a school-based decision.
Okay, and then I think we have time for one more question. Is there an SED requirement for families to have access the remote learning plan? I work professionally with many families and have never heard this term. Is this only in New York City?
No, when I was looking at the guidance, other states also have remote learning plans. They're calling them contingency plans, but it's the same concept. So it's a lot of states. California has it. I looked at Louisiana. I looked at other states. So it's not only New York City that we're talking about here, or New York State, I'm sorry, and New York City.
Okay, great. So Denise, I guess just to remind, did you want, how would you want to handle follow-up? Through the Include NYC helpline? Is there any other method for families that I can add to the chat box?
No, you know, since there were some questions that I needed to do a little more research on, I want to provide my email so people know that I stand by my word, and if I didn't answer something today, I can answer it in the email. So I can leave my email in the chat, or I can say it right now and we can put it in the chat.
Yep, I'll put it in the chat. If you don't mind saying it as well, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, it's DKHATRI2@schools.nyc.gov. Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you for your time today. And again, feel free to email me, because I know this is a hot topic, and it's a topic that I know is something that is on people's minds. So please feel free to email me so I can attend to anything that wasn't attended today. And I thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, stay well, and know that you're really doing your best to help your children.